head to Parliament now. The majority has dismissed demands by the minority for a revetting of 4 deputy ministers who've been approved by the House. The NDC MPs staged a walkout on Wednesday as Parliament approved the 4, including Asunaba Dapa and Ejay Mensah Kosa. The minority says it cannot be part of the approval of nominees it did not vet because at the time, minority MPs were in their constituencies planting trees on June 11 following the Speaker's directive. Tamale North MP Al-Hassan Suhini says the chairman of the Appointments Committee disrespected the Speaker and wants Speaker Alban Gbabin to order a revetting.
In view of the circumstances, we do not have any opportunity to even examine the nominees. It is not the problem of the nominees that we did not get the opportunity to examine them. So even staying and voting against them may amount to being unfair to them. It is not their fault that we did not have the opportunity to vet them. It's the fault of the chairman of the committee, led or supported by the majority side. And we think that they need to understand that that is not what Ghanaians expect of us. They need to change their approach and they need to make it possible for us to meet them halfway so that government business can smoothly run. The Speaker requested our leadership to raise that on the floor of the House for consideration. And if you notice today, due to other equally important schedules, the leadership of our side, especially on the Appointments Committee, could not be present. The Speaker himself could not be present. But the motion had to be moved and taken. And perhaps that is why I am unable to speak to what the Speaker intended to do when he requested our leadership to raise the matter on the floor. I believe that the dynamics could have been different if the Speaker was chairing, that is Speaker Bagbin was chairing, and our leaders on the Appointments Committee were on the floor. The dynamics could have been different, but the import would have been the same, to boycott and not to be part of the approval of the 4 nominees.
Well, NPP MP Samuel Atachia says a revetting will not happen. He says minority MPs did not take their jobs seriously.
It is very important for you to understand the Appointment Committee of the Parliament of Ghana has a program and a schedule which predated the event of greening Ghana on the 11th of this month. So therefore, every serious-minded member of the committee will be bound by the program which predated the program. And what we're going to do will take precedence over any other thing. That is very, very fundamental. You should bear in mind that a member of parliament could also delegate maybe the chairman of the constituency that stand in my stead and do the planting, because there is an assignment anteceding what we are doing now in Parliament. So therefore, if you elected and you were derelict in your duties to Parliament and you didn't sit to vet the nominees of the president, it would be utter bad faith for you to say that by reason of the tree planting and my inability to come and do the parliamentary duty, the whole program of the committee should be cancelled. We don't run Parliament at the whims and caprices of your convenience.
Well, the NDC MPs had demanded another session to vet the nominees because, like you just heard, they were in their constituencies as part of the national tree planting exercise on June 11 during the vetting of the 4. The 4 were, however, approved by the majority side after chairman of the Appointments Committee, Joseph Osei-Wusu, presented the committee's report.
I will seek your leave for Hansard to capture the entire report as though same was read by me in extenso. Mr. Speaker, in all we have 4 nominees for consideration by this House.
So you heard that the Deputy Majority Leader speaking on the floor of Parliament. Well, the walkout by the minority was led by James Aveji, who is a Deputy Minority Leader. Let's get more on this from Parliamentary Correspondent Joseph Opoku-Gapo. At the news conferences.
So both sides have repeatedly held very different positions on this. For those on the NDC side, there was a lot of disrespect that was shown the Speaker, Alban Bagbin. And for the NPP side, the NDC side did not do what was expected of them as members of Parliament. The interesting bit is that in the course of this entire conversation, Speaker Alban Bagbin was not in the seat himself. Second Deputy Speaker, Mr. Esiama, was rather the one who presided over sitting and oversaw the back and forth. The first Deputy Speaker, Jose, who is also the chairman of the Appointment Committee, delivered his report, and all of that unfolded in the absence of Speaker Alban Bagbin himself. We're waiting to see what Speaker Bagbin will say about all of this when he takes his seat today, even as we await for sitting to begin. But one additional information we got was that the minority side had raised these concerns with the Speaker, that they were not part of the vetting process. They felt that his directive had been disrespected. And from what we are told, the Speaker insisted that it's an issue that should be dealt with on the floor of the House itself when the report was being approved, which was why the minority felt once the Speaker was not present to deal with the matter himself, well, then he needed to then, the leadership on that side needed to leave the MPs so they walk out, so they are not part of the approval process.
Joseph, tell us if this has ever happened in recent times when a side of the committee demands revetting and it's granted.
None that I've seen in recent times when it comes to revetting of MPs or even people for various deputy ministerial or even ministerial positions. The closest we've ever gotten to that was one of the instances that involved the vetting of one of the 2 deputy ministers for foreign affairs just about 3 weeks ago. And in that case, the committee had finished the vetting and discharged him. And just when he stepped out of the room, the minority side indicated that they felt that the committee did not have a quorum to allow for the vetting. So then they insisted that the vetting had to happen again. So he was brought back to take his seat. And then the earlier vetting, mainly by the majority side, lasted for just about 17 minutes. And the subsequent one lasted for about an hour. But that was a revetting that happened just minutes after the first one had actually taken place. But a case of approval being given at the level of the committee, approval being given in the House, and then a request for a revetting, that's something that hasn't happened recently. And if you look at the standing orders, what has to happen if that request should ever be granted is that the House would have to go ahead, first of all, and rescind the approval that was given yesterday. Although it was done by just the majority side, it's still Parliament that took the decision. And then after a motion of rescission has been approved in the House, then they can then go ahead and say, we are going ahead with the revetting and the laying of a new report to then allow for a reapproval of the said 4 ministers.
Joseph, yesterday was quite a busy day in Parliament, apart from the walkout by the minority and what we've just spoken about. There was also the appearance of the National Security Minister, Mr. Albert Kandapa. Just brief us on what exactly transpired when he appeared before the House.
He came to Parliament to respond to a question from Roxy Nafiamakwa, the South Dai MP, on what happened with this Ethiopia Yinsu Parado, who was the Ashanti Regional Security Liaison Officer, and how come he was actually removed from office. And the National Security Minister explained that he had a 2-year contract that was supposed to expire in December 2022, but the National Security Coordinator along the line decided to cancel his contract. And letters had been written to him asking him to vacate the position because his contract had actually been cancelled. But Mr. Oprayado refused to then obey the said directive to exit office, and so a team of security operatives were sent from Accra to Kumasi to go amicably get him to step out of office. And if he refused, go ahead and lock up the doors and get him out of the office. And for the National Security Minister, Albert Kandapa, that's exactly what the men who moved from the national headquarters went to do. He responded to claims that Mr. Ayenso Prado had allegedly been assaulted, because he made that point in his interview on Joy FM some days ago, speaking of Mr. Ayenso Prado. But the National Security Minister says no formal complaint has since come to him with regards to the said claim of assault, and that if it ever gets to him, he will go ahead and investigate that particular issue. Interesting.
So he was able to give what happened in terms of the account from the side of what Mr. DCOP Oprayado did, and not what the operatives who went there to take him out of office did.
He explained that the operatives, first of all, asked him to leave the office because then his tenure was over. He was hostile to them, according to the National Security Minister. And according to Mr. Kandapa, DCOP Oprayado, at a point in time, pulled out his sidearm on the men who had actually gone in there. And eventually then they had to get him out. So he gave that separate account of what the men did, but he went on to make the point that there were possibly other options to use in getting him out, but at that moment they felt that that was actually the best way around it. And to quote Mr. Albert Kandapa, if the opportunity arises and a similar situation recurs, they would go ahead and act the same way they acted the last time.
And finally, on what transpired yesterday, there was the LGBTQI issue, and quite a debate about it. Share with us.
Essentially, there had been a petition from political activists to Speaker Alban Bagbin asking him to go ahead and guide the House to enact laws to restrict the activities of the groups that are promoting LGBTQ. And Mr. Bagbin responded with a very straight to the point letter indicating that those processes have begun, the necessary consultations are ongoing in Parliament to allow for the enacting of this particular law that will restrict the activities of groups that are promoting LGBTQ. Because in the words of Mr. Bagbin, the letter that he wrote to the political activists, this is something that will negatively impact Ghana society, and Parliament is taking the processes very seriously.
Parliamentary correspondent Joseph Abukugapo there giving us basically a wrap of what transpired in Parliament yesterday, starting from that walkout by the minority demanding a reverting of some 4 deputy ministers designate who were eventually approved by the House. And then he gave us an update of the appearance of the National Security Minister, Albert Kandapa, and lastly, the Speaker's comment on LGBTQI activities in Ghana.